is right in front of you.
This story happened in 2020 at 3 a.m. I was in the office at that time with my regular job at a BPO company in Ortigas. I'm a really big fan of paranormal stuff ever since I watched videos of paranormal investigations or actual ghost footage caught on camera. That Saturday morning at 3 a.m, I turned on my voice recorder and just left it recording for a couple of minutes. I'm just curious, what would my recorder pick up at that time, because the last time, in 2018, I recorded a lady sounding like she's in pain, and many of my colleagues had their fair share of spooky moments in the office as well, and my hoodie got scratched by something when I was the only one left in the area. My recording lasted about 16 minutes, and when I reviewed it, there was the sound of a child that sounded like it was playing with someone, or something, at the 7:36 minute mark. And at the 7:41 mark, it sounded like someone snatched a toy from the kid, sounding like an angry child. Note, there were no children in the office at all.
I need to tell someone about what I saw that night. It is still terrifying for me whenever these memories enter my mind. It is perhaps the most traumatizing experience of my life, and I still can never forget this. Back around 2013, before I was going off to college, I was just at home, relaxing this night. My family was preparing to go out, but I decided I will not go with them, as I've had a hard week and I need a night to myself to relax. This was a weekend, I guess Saturday night, and I was left alone in our house. Our house is in Manila, very spacious. We have a bathroom on the 3rd floor near the stairs, and a clear hallway on the 2nd floor with a huge window. I was just relaxing in the living room at this time, and I suddenly feel the urge to go to the bathroom, so I went to the 3rd floor. It was already dark now. I usually don't open all the lights to save the electricity. As I was about to go downstairs, however, I did open the lights, and I was shocked to the view that I had just seen on the hallway. This thing is all white, looking like a spider and a human figure at the same time. Both its hands and legs are on the floor, crawling backwards very fast. The hair, so long, following this figure dragging along. Its mouth twisted back towards me, hanging open wide. My heart is pumping so fast because it was my first encounter to see this. The sight of this otherworldly entity, not just standing or walking around, but crawling backwards, contorted, disfigured. I scream at this time, and I run to lock my door. I kept on crying. I opened all the lights, and I messaged all of my friends to calm me down. I am still so scared, even after this night, because this is not the last time for me to see this awful girl. She haunts my life. It is rare for me to see her, but it comes so unexpectedly. This is why it is so scary. I never know what can I expect. The most frightening thing to me, however, is that it's only ever when I open my bedroom door that I see her. And every time I lay eyes on her, she has moved closer to my bedroom. I fear to the bottom of my heart that one day I am going to wake to see this thing, arched over my bed, its mouth wide open.
Many years back, Andrew Simmons, an English explorer, visited a small island of Cagayan, Sulu. It is a lonely spot of land in the Sulu Sea between the Philippine Islands and Malaysia. There are strange stories on the island related to a tribe of cannibals with cat's eyes called Berbalangs. When hunger for human flesh urges them, they will lie down in tall grass. They will then fall into a trance and go hunting for victims in their winged forms, while their bodies lie hidden behind tall grass. The people of Cagayan Sulu have been living in fear of these Berbalangs for generations. They warned Andrew that the Berbalangs made horrid moaning noises that are loud when they are far away, but grow fainter as they approach. When they are very close to you, the sound of wings flapping can be heard, and their eyes would move in the dark like fireflies. They told Andrew that a coconut pearl, an opal rarely found in the coconut, would keep him safe from the Berbalangs. Without one, the only defense is a kris, a local traditional knife, with its blade rubbed with lemon juice. He tried to buy a coconut pearl, but found out later that it would only protect the one who discovered it. It would be powerless if given or sold. Andrew asked if anyone would come with him to see the tribe. Only one brave young man, Matali, volunteered. They started in the morning and finally reached the Berbalangs settlement in the late afternoon. Matali refused to go any closer. "We've seen it. Now let's go." "We're not stopping now." Andrew insisted that they go on further. "I'm not going in there. If you insist, you go alone." Matali smeared his kris with some lemon juice and handed it to the daring yet somewhat ignorant explorer. So Andrew went in alone. The place looked deserted. Only a few chickens and a goat remained. However, in one hut, Andrew saw some rice boiling in a pot, as if someone had just left it there. Andrew went back to Matali and told him what he discovered. Matali begged the Englishman to leave, saying that the Berbalangs were hunting in their other form. It would be a suicide to stay there any longer. As the sun was already setting, they finally made their journey home. Before they were even halfway back, it was already dark. Suddenly, there was a loud, moaning noise. "The Berbalangs," Matali whispered in fear. "Pray they will pass without noticing us." They both hid behind the grass. The moaning grew fainter and fainter, which meant the Berbalangs were getting closer and closer to them. Soon, the sound of flapping wings could be heard. Matali and Andrew began to fear the worst when they saw fireflies flying over the tall grass. They halted for a second, as if they noticed something hidden in the grass, but then left. The moaning began to grow louder, and Matali sighed with relief. "They're gone," he said. "We're safe for now. Hurry, we must go." The two raced for Matali's village. As they ran beneath the tall grass, they could hear the moaning noises, which slowly and gradually grew fainter and fainter. At one point, Andrew saw an isolated house. "We must help the people inside," he told Matali. "The man who lives there, Hassan, has a coconut pearl," Matali said. "Now hurry, we have to escape." Andrew followed Matali, and they got back to their safe village after a short while. In the morning, Andrew laughed at himself for believing that story. He thought it was silly to let Matali's fear and some fireflies scare him. When he met Matali later that day, however, Andrew asked about Hassan. Matali said he lied about Hassan owning a coconut pearl. Hassan had arrived a week before Andrew on some research expedition to learn more about the island. Matali reckoned Hassan could probably be dead by now. Andrew, insisting that the story was mere superstition and was not true, decided to prove himself right by inviting Matali to go to Hassan's house with him. When the two of them got to Hassan's house, no one answered to their calls. They then realized the door was not locked, so they went in. They saw a desk with papers scattered everywhere on the floor. Matali went into the room while Andrew walked towards the desk to see what was there. Suddenly, he backed away and shouted for Matali. In the corner of the desk was Hassan, only his skeleton, with a few scraps of flesh clutching a shredded paper. Suddenly, they heard moaning noises outside, growing fainter and fainter and fainter.
This happened 1 year ago. Ever since this, I've been struggling to sleep. I felt like it is always watching me and my little sister, Mai. Our house, it was only recently built, and the surroundings were quite uncomfortable. Also, very eerie. I shared a room with Mai, but we slept in different beds. It was a double-decker bed near the window. We both decided that I will sleep on top while she will take the bottom. On that night, I was expecting a happy dream, but my expectations were shattered ever since I saw her. I was sleeping when I suddenly wake up for some reason. You know when you wake up in a panic, or you feel like you are falling and falling until your eyes will open. It was like that. I could see only a silhouette of a figure. At first, I couldn't tell if this is a man or a woman, or maybe just a light from the window. But it comes closer to me. It becomes more visible. It is bright white. I guess it took me a while to come out of dazed sleep, but I was creeped out when I remembered I am laying on my back, looking up at the ceiling, and that this person, this thing, was looking down, staring at me. Its lips were moving, as if she was mumbling something I could not hear. I tried to avert her gaze, but I could not move, not my eyes, nor my body. I have no choice but to look at this woman. At first I think she looks like Mother Mary, and that time I thought it was her. She was there beside me, her hands clasped together like she was praying. I was supposed to be relieved, but why do I feel so scared? My panting, it grows heavier and deeper. My hands were bare cold and sweating. The scary part of that night was when we both stare at each other's eyes, and then her eyes, it becomes red. I don't know what to do, but my eyes begin to tear up, and it felt like burning. Call it exaggerating, but that's really what happened. Then finally, in one blink, the woman disappears. That was the most grateful blink I've ever had in my life. I tried to sleep again, but I failed. I could only cry until morning came. Since that night, I make excuses so that I couldn't sleep on my bed, afraid that she comes back. Weeks passed. Mai confessed that she saw the same woman. I didn't utter a word as I listened to her story, which was the same as mine. I listened every single detail of the way she described the woman. It was the same. I finally asked if she saw her at my bed, and she nodded as she burst into tears. We tell our mother our problems, and she didn't believe it, but she separated our beds. Time passed, and that woman doesn't come back to us. A month ago, when I was sleeping together with my little sister, I suddenly woke up. I wanted to sleep, but I couldn't. Minutes later, Mai also wakes up, when, coincidentally, we hear a bang on the kitchen and the door swings open. I cry heavily when I see that woman again, but this time she was not coloured brightly white. She was pitch dark, shadowy black. We were both feeling panicking as she comes closer to us. She was not walking. She was more like floating in the air. Mai held my arms as she shouted and cursed at her. Our grandparents and siblings woke up because of the noise we made. That woman disappeared when the light of the room turned on. We didn't tell them exactly what happened because all we could do was cry again. These days, me and Mai have been dreaming the same thing. Not some happy and nice dream, but a nightmare. In that nightmare, I could see that woman. Or we could see her. Is this coincidence? No way. It can't be. Why would she always appear to us? We do not even know her. But my gut tells me she wants something from us, and I do not know how long it will be before she comes to take it.
In March 18th, 1996, at around 4 p.m. local time, the nightclub, or as commonly referred to in Philippines as disco, the Ozone Disco, caught fire. It happened in Quezon City, Manila. I had to mention the location to point out that it happened in a metropolitan area. Supposedly such matters could have been avoided or at least dealt with accordingly in a quick manner. You can just imagine it being in the nation's capital, where police and fire servicemen are within a call away, as opposed to it being in a rural area, where it would take quite a while for a response to reach their destination. Now, I was still in the Philippines when this happened. I was 11 years old, and am 24 now, and living abroad. This was a first in the Philippines, as it is said to be the worst club fire in the world. More than 160 people died, and about 92 others were injured. This incident shook the entire Metro Manila, and up to this day, families and friends and simply everyone who knew about this incident still have not coped with the sadness and grief of such a tragic event. As for those of you who are wondering how it happened, well, there are a large number of reasons, but I think the most popular and widely accepted fact was that the doors open inward rather than outward. If you ask anybody, they will tell you exactly that. When the fire broke out, nobody noticed. When the blaze grew, that is the only time people realized that there was a fire. The club being popular at the time, people would naturally flock to it. It became a symbol of social status, and this made it even more popular with the younger generation of the time. That being said, the place was packed, and when the blaze grew, people panicked and they all rushed the only door. See, there's another reason. Just one door and no fire exit. And just imagine, the door opens inward. Even if they tried, nobody could open the doors. Push? How? There was no room. The location of the fated Ozone Disco, or simply Ozone to most people, is now desolate up to the year of writing this, in 2009. Now, here is where my story begins. Soon after the incident, the sight of burnt corpses made headlines. May it be TV or newspaper, internet wasn't mainstream at that time. People would only find the horrible accident that occurred there. It had been the news of the year. People would talk about it and could not come to accept how a sad and tragic event could happen. The Ozone Disco became a thing of interest, and as you may have already guessed, a great number of hauntings have been reported in the area. This happened a couple of years after the incident. Me and my friend were in a jeepney, public transportation, look it up, at around 9 p.m. on our way to our other friend's house. Our jeep passes by that route, and we would always look out the window at the now desolate place where the Ozone once stood. It was just me and my friend. The driver then told us, "You boys keep looking at that place, and you might find something that'll scare the wits out of you." I then turned to look, and sitting next to the driver was a man with his head turned at 180 degrees, looking right at me. I couldn't stop yelling curses. Luckily, the jeep had to slow down for an intersection, and I jumped out with my friend pacing after me. The place was filled with local bars, not discos, so there were lights, so I was a bit more relieved, but could not brush the horror out of my shaking self. My friend then asked me, "What's wrong?" I told him, "For Pete's sake, did you not see it?" He said, "See what?" I interjected, "The man in the jeep." My friend stopped looking at me with one eyebrow raised. He knew, I did too sorta, that it was just me, him and the driver in the jeep. Think that was the end of that? I really had to be a bother that night, and had to ask my friend to accompany me home, to which he kept questioning my manhood. Upon arriving home, I told him he could stay, but he's not one who believes in such supernatural things, so he refused and left. I was sitting in the couch or sofa, still feeling my heart go a mile a minute. My mum was still awake, chopping vegetables for tomorrow. My uncle, who was a taxi driver, came home. He went to get a drink from the fridge, and then sat down with me in the living room. We started chatting. As much as I hated to bring up anything about the Ozone Disco, unfortunately my uncle, said, "That disco sure is sad, isn't it?" I just said a quick and apathetic, "Yeah." He went on to say, "I mean, it somehow affects taxi business." I said nothing. "I went by the Ozone, but did not stop there. A few buildings from it, I picked up my last customers for the night before heading home. Then, an old man on a rusty old bicycle started to follow me. He seems too old to be able to catch up, but somehow, he does not want to stop following me. I tried to drive a little faster, but my passengers told me not to, as they were not in a hurry. To me, it sounded like easy cash. I can get a high fare just by going slow. The old man, still in view in my rearview mirror, is gaining on me. I came to a red light and had to stop. Around 12 midnight, stoplights in the Philippines take longer to change. The old man got off his bike and started walking towards us. He finally stood by my window and knocked 2 gentle knocks. I promptly, annoyed as I was, wound down the window and asked, "There a problem?" And he began to talk in a slow and crackly voice. "I noticed you have been driving around the block. Are you lost?" I told him no, my customers are joyriding. Said man scratched his chin for a second, my uncle told me, and he seemed satisfied enough. "But I did notice your 2 passengers don't seem to have any heads," said the old man as he picked up his bike and went off. My uncle stopped there and went home to get some sleep. Ozone is not of this world. I grew up in the Philippines, and I'm used to powerful typhoons crossing our country. While my hometown is rarely visited by typhoons due to its geographical location, watching the news about the aftermath of the typhoon was just a mundane scene. But on the 8th of November 2013, the entire country was reeling from what could have been the strongest typhoon of the century. Super Typhoon Yolanda, international name Haiyan, wreaked unimaginable havoc in central Philippines, Visayas region. Tacloban City, the regional city of Region 5, was the worst hit. The disaster claimed more than 10,000 lives, destroyed millions of dollars worth of crops and properties, and displaced millions of people. The locals are used to typhoons as the region's located at the eastern seaboard of the country. However, everyone got caught off guard by the storm surge. No one was aware about the imminent danger days before Haiyan struck the region. No one listened nor cared about the impending danger of the storm surge, which was reiterated a number of times by National Weather Bureau. Thousands of rotting corpses lay along the highway towards the airport, which is located at the peninsular part of the city, sandwiched by 2 bodies of water. Search and rescue operations were futile as well. The entire city reeked of death and despair. It felt like it was a scene straight out of a high-budget Hollywood disaster movie, only that this one happened in real life. Horrible was an understatement. On March 2nd, 2014, I moved to Tacloban City. It was my first facility assignment after I finished my training as an air traffic controller. First job, first facility assignment. I was feeling excited at that time, and all the terrible things I've read and heard about this city were briefly covered by excitement. The city during that time still had an unstable electricity connection, except for the airport. As day turns to night, the city is plunged into darkness, and it becomes eerily quiet. I stayed at the 3rd floor of the control tower since the staff house was totally damaged by the storm surge. On the 3rd night, I woke up at exactly 3 in the morning. As I opened my eyes, I saw a tall, dark figure standing at the foot of my bed. At first, I thought it was our office assistant. We were 3 in the room at the time. The figure wasn't moving, and it felt like it was staring at me. The room was dimly lit, all thanks to the moon's illumination, but it was clear as day that the figure wasn't our office assistant. I just shrugged it off, thinking that my mind was playing tricks. The next day, I told my experience to my other roommate, my colleague, who also happened to have a strong 6th sense. She nonchalantly said, "We're 6 inside our room. The other 3 are just lost souls, probably typhoon victims. Just pray." The hair on my arms just rose. Weeks later, my colleague and I were the only ones inside the room. We were both on our laptops, doing our own business, when suddenly we smelled something. It was a sharp, distinct smell of an orchid. I got anxious and asked my colleague if she smelled something. From her body language, I could sense that she was really scared. She leaned on me and whispered, "She's right in front of you. Don't forget to pray for her eternal repose." I thought she was joking, but I was feeling cold at that time. I prayed hard that night. The following day, I asked one of the airport employees if he knew someone who loves orchids. "We have a former employee who used to plant orchids and other flowers in the control tower. She died during Yolanda," he said. The hauntings continued, but eventually I got used to it. I occasionally went to the city's cathedral and lit a candle for the eternal repose of the lost souls around the airport. Fast forward to the 7th of November 2014. On the eve of the Yolanda/Haiyan anniversary, I rode a jeepney from downtown to the airport. It was just one ride away, around 30 minutes with traffic. For those who don't know, a jeepney is a ubiquitous mode of transportation in the Philippines. Passengers would sit in front of each other, and the jeep usually has a capacity of 20 passengers, 10 on each side. I was at downtown doing some errands. By 6 p.m. it was getting dark, and I hailed a jeep that would take me straight to the airport. The airport is the last stop, so basically most passengers would alight before me. As we neared the airport, we were only 4 left inside the jeepney. I was seated near the driver, while the other 3 were seated at the middle part. As we neared the airport, the highway became dark. The streetlights weren't working, and there were only a few people walking along the streets. The 3 other passengers, 2 adults, male and female, and 1 male child, probably 7 to 8 years old, were dressed in an ordinary way, nothing spectacular to be honest. I assumed they were local fishermen along the area. Suddenly, the adult male shouted, "Berbalangs," which means that the driver should stop, since the family would alight the jeep in the next few seconds. I thought the driver didn't hear, maybe because of the loud roar of the jeep's engine, so I told him to stop. He did and asked me, "You going down, kid? I thought you were going to alight at the airport." I told him that the 3 passengers will alight here, not me. What he did next was truly terrifying. He started to speed up. The road was still dark, however, from the distance, I could already see the runway lights. We were near the airport. I could sense something was wrong. The other passengers were nowhere to be found, and I thought they went down when the jeep stopped momentarily minutes ago. The driver didn't utter a word. I began to break into a cold sweat. My heart began to pound. When we finally arrived at the airport, the facade of the terminal was brightly illuminated by LED lights. Finally, I saw his face. He was terrified. I gave him the fare, and he told me something that made my hair raise. He said, "You were completely alone, even before the dim part of the road. When he told me someone will alight, I sped up. I've heard stories from other drivers just like this one. Did you see them?" I nodded nervously. They might be one of the typhoon victims. Some say they aren't aware they're already dead. Please pray for their eternal repose. As I alight the jeep, I noticed that the seat where the other passengers sat a while ago was wet. It didn't rain that time. It seemed that someone spilled a bottle of water or something. And then it dawned on me. They were indeed the lost souls of the area. Remember that the entire city was inundated by a storm surge as tall as a 3-story building.
Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.